Hi, and welcome to another episode of I Like Being a Kid. My name is Craig Jones,
And I'm Karla Kirby.
and we are with the Programming and Outreach Department of the Rapides Parish Library, and we are here to talk with you about children's literature and all of the things that make being a kid great. Today we are talking about two different authors. I am talking about Katherine Applegate, also known as K.A. Applegate, in some of her older works.
Yes, and I am talking about Steve Jenkins. So if you're not familiar, he was very well known for children's nonfiction picture books. We had not done a nonfiction author up to this point. So his books are kind of the ones I grab when I want some cool, fun facts about animals and things. So I'm excited to talk about him as well.
Yeah, I'm really excited because I've read some of his bigger known books, like What Do You Do with a Tale Like That?
Mm-hmm.
But for preparation, I read Bones and Apex Predators and some of his other stuff, and they were really enjoyable.
I love his stuff so much. So just to give you a little background, Steve Jenkins, he was born March 31st, 1952 in Hickory, North Carolina. He did pass away December 26, 2021, so not that long ago, from a splenic artery aneurysm at the age of 69, according to his wife, Robin. Robin Page was his wife, and she actually helped him illustrate a lot of his books as well. So this is kind of just the story of him. He grew up, his father was in the military, so he moved around a lot. He was born in North Carolina, and he did go back to North Carolina for college, but he kind of lived all over. Later on in life, his father became a physics professor and an astronomer. And they actually co-wrote the book that he did about the solar system. He and his dad were co-authors on that one. So that's really cool. Kind of circle, yeah, because most of his books are just him. But as a child, he always imagined that he would be a scientist one day. He said he always had a collection of like lizards and turtles and bugs and all these things. And he was fascinated by books. He collected fossils and rocks. So this is what he thought he would do with his life. But he was also a very talented artist. So he ended up going to college for graphic design, and he graduated with a degree in graphic design. He moved to New York and worked in advertising with his wife. He worked for a big firm, and then also they owned like a small independent advertising firm. Robin Page is his wife.
Can I ask a question right quick?
Yes.
So is that sort of where he got his illustration information about?
Yeah, and I think his style. We'll talk about his art style, but it's so cool. So as he was working there, he ended up having 3 children, and he said the thing that inspired him most were the questions his children asked about just random things, animals, facts, and it inspired him to write books that answered those questions. So, he wrote more than 50 books. Sold over 4 million copies, and they were translated into 19 different languages. He won a lot of awards. I'm not going to read them all. He had 7 times he was on the ALA Notable Book List, 6 times the New York Public Library's 100 Best Titles for Reading and Sharing, Junior Library Guild Top 10 Books for Youth, Junior Library Guild Selection 13 times, the Theodore Seuss Geisel Award, and he won a Caldecott Honor Book. So, and that's just to list a few. The Caldecott Honor Book was What Do You Do with a Tale Like That, which may be his most well known, but there's also the other one, Never Smile at a Monkey.
Yeah.
That one's really well known as well. I love that book. So you can see there's a whole list of awards. I'm not reading them all, but he won lots of things. So his art. So it's really interesting. If you look at all of his different books, I'm not going to open them for copyright reasons, but his medium for his artwork is paper. So he tears paper.
Okay.
Yeah, it's torn paper made into the shapes of the things he needs.
While I was reading the books, I was looking at the illustrations, and I was sort of wondering how he was able to do that.
Yeah, you can see it's really interesting. And he said that torn paper worked really well for fur, particularly furry animals. But he said he would tear it, he would slice it with an X-Acto knife, and he assembled the pieces just like super precisely to make the image he needed. And he would even make shading, like different shades of the paper for like really delicate things, like a baggy rhinoceros skin to look like it was painted. Like, it's so cool. So he used a lot of different kinds of paper too. He didn't just have one type. So he did like a marbleized paper. There was a paste paper that he made, and he and his wife made that together. And that one, he said, made rich textures for vultures' black feathers.
Okay.
Yeah, that's interesting. Japanese rice paper for like translucent creatures like a jellyfish. He used that. Bark paper, even butcher paper. And he said one time he salvaged a piece of burned wax paper from a pizza box because he loved the texture on it. And he was like, wow, that's going to be something cool. So he would just see paper everywhere, different types of paper. And he would see his art and the animals in that. So I love that.
I really love like talking with artists and seeing how artists make their things make their art because they see things in a completely different way than at least I do.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And honestly, I had read so many of his books, and until I was doing this research, I didn't realize his illustrations were paper.
Yeah.
I didn't know what they were. I knew it was some kind of collage effect. But yeah, it's just torn or cut paper of all different types and colors and textures. And I love that.
That's fascinating.
I know. So yeah. So, and I think he's so interesting. We tend to think of people a lot as either very science-minded or very art-minded, and he just perfectly, he was definitely at his heart a scientist, and he loved facts and just things about animals and research data. But he also, he was an artist. So yeah, I love Steve Jenkins so much. I'm sad that obviously he passed away because I couldn't wait to see what he would do next. I loved every time one of his books came out. I was very excited about it. These are books, if you're a teacher or a parent, I would say these are really great books for like a story time or reading aloud for an older group, like 2nd, 3rd grade. They're just really interesting, like animal facts. Some of them are gross, some of them are creepy, but I mean, when I read these books to kids, they're like they will audibly gasp at the facts. They're fascinating. And I wouldn't even say, which I hate when people say this anyway, but I wouldn't even say they're boy books. I mean, all children have really been interested in them. I would say kids who had never picked up a nonfiction book. And the good thing about his book, so he'll have, whatever the format is. So what would you do with a tale like that? There's all the different tales. Tells you what animal it belongs to and what their tale, what purpose it serves. Yeah. But then when you get to the end of all of his books, there is just a big like
an infographic.
Yes, like lots more information about that animal and where you can learn more. And so his books are just so informative for your just curious kid that wants to know more and more. He's amazing. If I'm thinking who do I pick up for a nonfiction book, particularly about animals, I go Steve Jenkins. Now, they're not all animals, though. He did have that solar system book with his dad. And Bones. This is a very interesting one with some gross, creepy stuff, too, but kids love it.
And I really liked the fact that, especially in Bones, they always had the scale. Like, this is to what scale it is.
That's really common in a lot of his, like, actual size. Yeah, he shows all these different things and the actual size of them. So you see, this is the size of a gorilla's hand. It's this big. And then you'll see some teeny tiny bugs. And so you see the perspective of different things as opposed to just whatever the picture is fills the page. You really get to see. Some of them will just, the eyeball of something is this big. And so actual size is a really good one too. I don't know if I have a favorite. I don't know. But can I talk about this one? Yeah.
Certainly.
Sorry. No, it's okay. Big and Little is one that I love because this one is really geared to a younger crowd. I would say most of his are for those older kids, but you could easily do this for a preschool age. It's very few words on the page. It's just big versus small animals, good comparisons, and again, beautiful illustrations.
Yeah. And I mean, with The Top of the World as well, that's another one that's not necessarily about animals, but really beautifully illustrated as well.
I love all of his work so much. I really do. So he, this was a quote that he said, and I loved this. It's a little lengthy, sorry, but when asked about his books, he said, "Children don't need anyone to give them a sense of wonder. They already have that. But they do need a way to incorporate the various bits of pieces of knowledge they acquire into some logical picture of the world. For me, science provides the most elegant and satisfying way to construct this picture." Yeah. I love that. So he really just, like I said, his books were just, my kids ask these questions, and I bet other kids are asking them. And so let me answer them with these books.
Yeah.
Science was very important to him. He was known to be very gentle, soft-spoken. Like, his voice and his way of communicating was very soothing to people. Yeah. But there was once, I think it was a decade or so ago, he was giving a speech to a group of educators, and he was just talking about the dangers of ignoring scientific data and manipulating facts for political gain. And some of them walked out. Wow. And he was shocked because he was not someone who considered himself controversial or confrontational.
Yeah.
To him, science facts are just facts, and the fact that people ever consider them as theories as opposed to fact was baffling to him. Yeah.
And now, where was this speech again?
All I know is that it was for a group of educators.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And so he just, he didn't even think what he was saying was controversial. And again, he was just so smooth and soft-spoken. And so it kind of shocked him that people walked out of that. But yeah, I mean, he was very much, he was passionate about science and scientific data being taken as fact and not just as theories. That was something that kind of ruffled his feathers a little bit. Yeah. But yeah, if you've never read Steve Jenkins, I'm telling you, you're missing out. If you have kiddos that love animals, that love real facts about real things, or if you have a reluctant reader, I will say, if you have a kid that you can't get to pick up a book, they're not going to want to read, I think Steve Jenkins is a good place to start because they're just fun and different. I don't know anybody's books who are like Steve Jenkins.
Yeah, it is definitely one of a kind. I remember whenever I was working like at the desk, and going into the shelves, and I'd always be able to pick out which one is a Steve Jenkins book just because it had its own flavor about it. That's so unique.
Absolutely. And I love his books. The more I researched about him, I knew his books, I didn't know much about him. I've kind of loved learning about him. I mean, he is very well known, an expert in this community, and just so unassuming. He didn't seem to present himself or live his life like a award-winning famous author. He was just a very normal guy, dad. He loved his kids. He loved science and quirky art, and from what I could tell, he and his wife lived a pretty cool, crunchy life. So I love that. So that's Steve Jenkins, my author for this month. And I know you're very excited about your author.
Oh my gosh, I am. So Katherine Applegate, it's really interesting because she said that she did not really like reading whenever she was younger. Yeah, she was like, I hated it. I found it boring. But then she, in fact, generally whenever she's speaking to a group of people, she has the adults cover up their ears so that they don't hear it. But she said that she found her book, like the right book, she said. And it was Charlotte's Web.
Oh.
And she just fell in love with it. She said it was like the book was made for her.
That's the thing, kids. If you think you don't like reading, you haven't found the right book yet. I always say, or even adults, anyone.
Yeah, that was, whenever she said that, it really took me back to like the 5 laws of library science with the every person has their book and every book has its reader.
Yes.
Which is why it is so important that we have so varied of a collection.
Right.
But she calls, and this is like right on her website, super easy to find. She calls writing, and this is going to be a quote, the best job on the planet. And one time, whenever she was asked about it, she was like, yeah, I get to sit in my pajamas all day and write stories. What's not to love? But then that's seemingly a joke. And she later says that really the most rewarding part of her job is being able to meet young readers and talk with them and be able to see that her books were able to make a connection. So her and her husband, Michael Grant, who you might know, he wrote the Gone series and like teens fiction. Yeah, so they're actually
I knew that
like
name was ringing a bell.
Yes. Yeah, they're like a power couple whenever it comes to
I did not realize
children's
that's who
fiction.
her husband
Yeah,
was.
I only learned that about like 1 or 2 years ago because I was doing a very deep dive into her.
Not in a weird way.
And Michael actually helped her write the Animorph series, which was really how I got into her. She has a very generous and flattering definition of a writer. Whenever she was asked when she started writing, she was like, I've been writing since 4th grade because that's whenever I made my first story, and it was about a pig named Alice. Like I said, she didn't really like reading until she found her book, which was Charlotte's Web. And she says to young writers, a lot of the things that I found weren't necessarily about like her as a writer, but rather advice for future writers, which I really liked. She said that the main advice she could give is be persistent. And she said that helped her win the Newbery Prize, which she won the Newbery Prize for the one and only Ivan.
That is such a good book.
It really is.
I love that book.
I love all of the characters in it, from Stella to Ruby to Bob. Love Bob. In fact, Bob got his own sequel with the one and only Bob, and it won her the Newbery. And apparently there was like a whole lot of debate of like, why are you writing a book from the perspective of a gorilla? And she was like, well, why not?
Right. And that gorilla story needed to be told.
Definitely.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it was so interesting to me because she was talking about how unique it was that she was writing a book from a perspective of a gorilla, and like in the Animorphs books, like 1/5 of the book are narrated by a guy who's literally trapped in a red-tailed hawk's body.
I didn't think of that. So she's been preparing for that.
Yeah. A lot of her books, at least, have a very like conservationist and animal preservation bent to it, which I loved.
But I don't think, especially children's not everyone can write from the perspective of something that's not human, from such a real like authentic place that I don't know how you would do that, and she does.
Yeah, she actually in one of the interviews or rather it was a speech that she was giving, and then there was a Q&A session afterwards. There was someone who asked, what is your best advice from writing from another perspective? And she said that a great way of portraying that is to just forget who you are for a while and just dive into the subject that you're writing about. Because I mean, with Wish Tree, that's not Wish Tree. With Wish Tree, she actually writes from the perspective of a red oak tree.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, it's
I have not read that
beautiful.
One.
Oh my gosh, this is, I would say, one of her more special ones. I mean, they're all special,
sure,
but like, I think that just the weight of this one is a bit different.
Now I want to read it.
Yeah. I think it's a really good book to read to coincide with our summer reading theme this year.
Okay.
Because it does deal with some themes about like racism and things like that.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So our theme for this year for the summer reading program is All Together Now, and it is about kindness. And Wish Tree, are you aware of what a wish tree is?
No.
It is whenever people tie wishes to trees, and like, I wish that the world was better, or I wish that I could get a new phone, and then they just tie it to the tree. And apparently that is how the tree sort of wills itself to combat this hatred in the community. So it's really interesting. But the one and only Ivan is based on the true story of a gorilla that was in a shopping mall. She also wrote a picture book called Ivan, The Remarkable True Story of the Shopping Mall Gorilla. And it actually has been made into a movie with Angelina Jolie and Bryan Cranston in it. Applegate was never able to meet Ivan, but she actually dedicated the picture book to all the people who loved Ivan.
If you've never read that story, I mean, it's a fan. I mean, I had no clue that had happened, and it's a remarkable story. Yeah.
Yeah, my interest, like I knew about the one and only Ivan, but I read the picture book before this, and I was like, there were actually shopping malls, just because I was so removed from it. I did not realize that there were shopping malls that basically doubled as a mini zoo.
Right.
You know? And I think that ended at like probably early 90s, if I would guess.
Right, I mean, not that long ago. And the animals were just all alone, like just, I mean, most of them didn't even have a companion, and I mean, it was not built as a habitat in any way that supported how they would wasn't a great look. It was not great for the animals.
Yeah, it is rough sometimes reading through the one and only Ivan, just because he's so deprived.
Right.
I almost said the word neglected, but deprived is closer to what I wanted to say. And it's sad.
Yeah.
You know? She did write Animorphs, like I said. She wrote them with her husband, Michael Grant. And there were a lot of ghostwriters who worked on it as well.
There were so many.
There were so many. There were 54 of the main series.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's just of the main series. We're not counting the Megamorphs or the Andalite Chronicles or the Ellimist Chronicles.
Craig loves the Animorphs.
I can really get into a deep dive.
If you want just an Animorphs podcast, we can
do it. But like, what happened was she, according to a Reddit thread that I read. So I mean, grain of salt.
Very reliable source.
Of course. But apparently, just the deadlines were so stringent because Scholastic was making bank from them, and the deadlines were so stringent, and Katherine Applegate became pregnant, and during trying to raise a child, you know, she wrote over half of the series, but with some of them she said, I'm going to write the summary, I'm going to write what needs to happen, how we need to get there, and the rest of them ghostwrite. Right. I had thought at some time that that one of the ghostwriters was connected with Aaron Hunter for the Warriors and the Seekers.
Right.
I scoured the internet high and low to find confirmation for it, and I couldn't.
Okay.
But I did find that one of the ghostwriters did work on the Pixie Hollow books.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So, you know, some of them did move on to bigger and better things.
That's always tough on authors, and you don't think about that. You think, oh, they get a book deal for a huge series, they have it made. Yeah. But when they get those deals for a series and that publisher's making money on it, those deadlines are, and your life can get in the way or not, but you've agreed to it.
You've got to meet.
Got paid. So I can't imagine. It seems like a great thing, but I've heard other authors talk about that when they got that multi-series deal and suddenly something in life came up and they were in a panic to get those deadlines met. Yeah,
definitely. The Animorphs was made into a TV show. It's a very 90s TV show. Like, don't expect it to be, you know, top of the line. But
can you still watch it now? Like, does it stream anywhere? Or
you can find it on YouTube, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. Sean Ashmore actually played our main character, Jake. Okay. And he also played Iceman in the X-Men movie, which you know how much I love Iceman. So that was just another plus for the series.
Tying it all together.
It really is. But I was really interested in what you said about Steve Jenkins and about his connection with the animals and with facts, because Applegate says that children love animal stories because they can relate to the powerlessness that animals can feel in a human-dominated world. And so I I sort of thought that resonated a
That
lot,
makes a lot of sense,
with their
I
philosophy.
didn't think about how much both of them, but they both wrote a lot of animal books. I kind of didn't think about that when we chose them.
I thought about it, but I didn't necessarily think to what level they would sort of harmonize.
Right.
You know,
We don't. If anybody's not aware, like at the end of this episode, we will choose who our authors are for the next month, and we don't really like try to choose matching people per se. I don't.
No.
Craig doesn't even know who I'm gonna say.
I don't.
Yeah.
I think that you might just because I rave about this person all the time.
Yeah, I know who you're gonna say.
Yeah. But she also wrote the Remnant series. Now, heads up, like with the Animorph series, I would recommend them to be more in the teen section than the middle elementary school. Especially with the Remnant series. It is extremely dark, and it's for fans of like the 100 series.
Yeah.
You know, it's got that sort of sci-fi, but also kids sort of figuring it out, Lord of the Flies-ish situation.
I love her range too. Like you look at Animorphs, Remnants, Ivan, how yes they're all animal, but like how very genre wise those are.
Yeah.
You know, like,
and like Remnants doesn't really have much to do with animals at all.
Yeah, I mean she's just got a great range for, and I mean a lot of authors are really good at what they write, but she's got some range for sure.
Yeah, and I mean I think that a lot of her books just sort of they don't necessarily try to sugarcoat them away from the world, because with Animorphs, it's a war narrative, right. And you see the 5 kids and the 1 alien and their personalities and the way that they view the world just completely shift. And I've talked with numerous people, it's just such an important, like, anti-war narrative. Like if you're looking for anti-war propaganda, honestly, Animorphs is a really big one, because the children's lives are just ruined. She has a daughter with dyslexia, and she was talking about like the issues with getting her child to enjoy reading,
right.
And things like that. This is one of my favorite facts about her. One of her author photos is her in her pajamas around a bunch of crumpled paper, that she specifically chose to be her author photo because she wanted to show that writing is about making mistakes.
I love that.
Yeah, she is a really big proponent of keep working at it.
Yeah.
Keep on keeping on. So she wrote about Ivan because she was mad about the loneliness of the real Ivan. She wrote Crenshaw, which we haven't really talked about, but Crenshaw is another one that's sort of like Wish Tree, has a bit of a heavier feel to it. It is about like child hunger, and Crenshaw is basically the child's imaginary friend that sort of helps him through it. And she wrote Crenshaw because she was upset about child hunger. And she said that, this is a really interesting aside, Crenshaw was basically based off of the Jimmy Stewart movie Harvey, with Harvey the Rabbit. Yeah, so, and then whenever I heard that, I thought of our Harvey Rabbit, even though it's not necessarily related, but still interesting. She wrote Wish Tree because of her frustration with, and this is a quote from her, the vitriol of the election, presumably the 2016 election, because Wish Tree came out in 2017.
Right.
And she said that it was a very quick book that she wrote. And she wrote Endling, which, do you know anything about Endling?
I don't know.
She wrote Endling because she was mad about the mass extinctions that were occurring. So an Endling occurs to the last individual of a species. And so you have a Dearth, which is a species that she made. And apparently this character is the last Dearth in the world. And it's just showing the exploration of that character. And so, like I said, she doesn't really shy away from heavy topics.
I love that, but she tells them
yeah.
in such a way that, as a kid, you don't really think, I'm reading a book about world hunger. You know,
Yes.
yeah.
And she does it so tenderly and kindly. Like, it's sort of like being walked through a haunted house with Mary Poppins. You know,
Yeah.
The movie Mary Poppins, not the book Mary Poppins.
But I love how, I mean, those are big problems, like world hunger, problems
Yes.
with the election, the endlings. And so when you look at them as big problems, they feel overwhelming. But I love that she kind of shows them through one person experience. Like,
Yeah.
you know, when you just see the one child who's hungry, or the one creature who is the last one, it really, I don't know, just hits home more how
Definitely.
personal that journey is.
And it's really interesting that you say that, because like exactly my next point talks about how she discusses the importance of differing opinions and how it develops empathy. You know, so like you definitely hit the nail on the head.
It's true.
there.
Her books, if anything, they really make you feel empathy so much. Yeah.
And going back to Animorphs, because I have forgot to mention that the first 3 books of the series have been made into graphic novels now. So if you are a fan of reading graphic novels, definitely give them a try.
I thought those made cool graphic novels.
They really do.
Yeah.
One of my friends actually gave me the first one for like a Christmas gift or something like that. Yeah.
I can see that.
So that is Katherine Applegate. As you can see, she has a chunk of my life, you know, and I certainly do not resent her for that chunk of my life. She also wrote, just recently, she wrote Otter, which is about a sea otter, which again is an endangered species. And fun fact, my mom actually like called me and she's like, Katherine Applegate wrote a book about an otter. Can I read it? And so she has actually read it, and I was like, how did you like it? And she really enjoyed it.
Good.
Yeah. So it's definitely sad in parts, but what Applegate book isn't?
Right. Yeah. I think if you have somebody who likes to read books that they give them the feels a little bit, but also an engaging story too. Like I feel like her books suck you in and keep you turning those pages.
Yeah, definitely. There have been, like, whenever I was reading The One and Only Ivan, I was looking at how thick it was, but with it almost being written in poetry, and with the way that she writes it, those pages just basically turn to themselves.
Right.
So
I feel that way about her, but I haven't read as many of them as you have, but I never feel like I'm trudging through when I read her books.
No, not at all.
They are page turners, and like I said, they always give you the feels in some way, and I love that.
Yeah.
They make you look at some part of the world differently.
Yes.
And I love
definitely.
that.
So are you ready to announce
think we shall. So if you're not familiar, we flip-flop. So I chose the picture book author this one, and Craig did chapter. So we'll flip-flop. So for our picture book author for the month of May,
of course it's going to be Chris Van Allsburg. He did Jumanji's Zathura, Polar Express.
So many.
Yeah, he has a lot of really big names, but also some that you might not necessarly have heard of. So.
His artwork is so
gorgeous
and detailed, like
stunning. Not necessarily my introduction to it, but like my favorite editions of the Chronicles of Narnia will always be the Chris Van Allsburg versions.
I love his art. Love it. Yeah.
So what about our middle school book?
Yeah, so chapter book, I have gone back and forth. I was like, I may change my mind, but I want to go with a classic, so we're going to go with Beverly Cleary.
Okay.
Yes, for next month. Another classic, awesome, strong lady author. You know I love them.
They're icons.
Yes. I don't think we can go much further without covering Beverly Cleary. She has done so much. So
yes.
I'm excited. I know a lot of her books. I know a little about her, and I'm excited to dive in and learn more. So yeah.
Yeah. And thank you so much for watching.
Yeah.
We greatly appreciate it, and have a wonderful day.
Yep. Bye.